today I will talk about Arquillian and how we can simplify the way we build integration tests. As a JE developer, I'm quite used to work with the container. And what happens is that the container will help me to write less code by giving me some services that I don't have to build on my own. By following some convention, I can create some component, deploy this component on the server, and then I have access to a set of resources that will simplify the way I build my application. One example is the AGP. I can create a project, use some annotation, and the container will understand that I want to use transaction or I want to access to the DB, and it will give me the resources to connect to what I need. The problem is that when we need to test our application and we want to check out if what we've done meet our requirement, it can be quite hard. We can write a unit test quite easily, but when we come to write integration test, it can be a challenge because we need to start ourselves from the kind of resources that usually we have from the container. And so we have these two things. Unit tests, they're very relatively easy to write. They run in isolation, and the main concern is just a very specific part of our application, usually like an API for a component. Because of this, they are very quick to run, and they can run in the hidden and the building tools. The problem with the unit tests is that they don't tell us how the different components integrate with each other. So you can actually, you don't actually have the kind of confidence that you can have with an integration test, where you can check after you build your component how it behaves in the real environment in production. The problem with the integration tests is that they're usually quite hard to write. They are time-consuming. Like you need to mock a lot of resources, or you have to create a runtime that is in the test that is similar to the one that you have in production. And you can have problem with your application if it's very big. You need to build the application and deploy the whole application in your testing environment. And another problem is the fact that they will run in the hidden. This means that before you have a feedback about what's wrong in your application, it can take a while. Usually this kind of problem leads us to write a lot of unit tests that is good, but we skip the part of integration test. And what's the worst that could happen without integration test? This is an example of a bridge that was built in Washington. It was built with the latest technology of the time, in 1940. But they didn't consider the wind and the environment where they had to put the bridge. So after 2 months, the bridge started to oscillate and in the end collapsed. And if you only have a unit test, you have you know that some part of the system will work fine, but you don't know exactly how the project will behave once it's been deployed in production, and you can have some unpleasant surprises. So how can we make our life easier? We said the integration tests are hard. One of the things we can work on is the build. We can actually skip the build. If instead of building our application, copying file and assembling the archive using our building tools, that can be Maven or another building tools, we can build it with Java. And this is where another project comes in help. This project is ShrinkWrap. ShrinkWrap is a library, and what it does is representing, it will give you a Fluent API to create an archive by passing the classes that you want to put in the archive. So, for example, in this model example, I'm saying I just want a jar that contains the class greeter, and the result will be the greeter class will be copied inside the Java archive with all the structure of the packages, whatever it needs. And I'm telling him to add resources or bins XML, so that in the end what we have is a CDI compliant package. And ShrinkWrap is quite powerful. This is a small example where you can actually add a library and you can create web archives, and and what we have is a representation of our archive in our Java code. This means that we don't need the build anymore, and we have full control of what will finish in our archive. And because this is Java code, you can execute that in any kind of place where you execute normal Java code. So it works in your IDE, in your building tools, and whatever other tools you use to develop your application. Another advantage that I said before is the micro-deployment. If you have a very big application, you don't want to deploy everything your application does. It would take too much time, and if something goes wrong, it becomes very hard to identify what happened, which part of the system caused the problem. But if you use something like this, you can decide to deploy only a subset of your component. This way, the archive will be a lot smaller, and the result is that it will be a lot easier to check what went wrong. Okay, now we skip the build. What we actually would like to add is a component model for testing. It means that we want something similar to what J2E does for everything else, security, transaction, and email, for example. What we want is something that helps us to encapsulate our test logic inside some kind of structure, and then deploy this logic inside a container. We'll worry about configuring our container, starting the application, checking the results of the test, executing them, and giving all the resources that we need at the point. And this is Arquillian. Arquillian will give us all these kind of things. What it does is bring tests to the runtime in test, instead of giving us the responsibility to bring the runtime to the test. This is an example of what you can do with Arquillian. I don't know how many of you write unit tests or use test-driven development, but if you see this, it's actually a unit test. The only difference is there are three main differences. The first one is that instead of having at the top of the class, we have a run with Arquillian class. This is a JUnit specific annotation that tells us which runner to use to execute the test. In this case, we are saying that we want to use Arquillian to manage the life cycle of the test. We have a static method that we annotated with deployment. This is the method that Arquillian will call to obtain the archive that will be deployed in the container. And the archive is created as a ShrinkWrap. The test is a normal JUnit test, and the injector is actually the result of the build. The greeter class is a CDI component, and so because this test will run inside the container, is it possible to the container will create the component, so it's not something that we have to do ourselves, and Arquillian will inject the component inside the test. This way we can actually call the components as we were inside the container, like we are expecting to do in production. Arquillian will start up the container, or eventually it will access an already running container. Sometimes it's more convenient for development to to connect to an already existing container, because the start time can take some time, and if you have to turn it up and turn it off the container every time, it will happen that you will waste a lot of time. Once it's connected, we'll deploy the archive generated by ShrinkWrap on the container. It will run the test and on the container itself, and it will transmit the result. It will collect the result of the test and will send us to the client that executed the test. And it will undeploy the archive on the tester that's being executed. And when everything's finished, it will stop the container. The main benefit that you can have with this system is that Arquillian will integrate with an already existing unit framework. This example was done using JUnit, but it doesn't have to be JUnit. It can be TestNG, or it can be any other framework that you use to run the test. This means that the tests can run in every place where you run them, when you want to run them. It can be the building tools, or it can be the either. And we will see this later in the demo. Another important thing is that all these tests don't specify anything about the container, and there is not anything specific. Arquillian will just find which adapter needs to use by looking at the class path, and will deploy the test in the container that's been selected. You can actually, there are many different containers that can be used. These are just 4 of them, but there is even a Weld or a WebLogic and any other, Tomcat. There are different ways to run the container. Usually a container can be an embedded container, a managed container, and a remote container. The embedded container is just a call of the original container. It would run the test will run in the same virtual machine of the container. A managed container is the complete container that is downloaded somewhere, or you can have on your somewhere in your computer. And Arquillian will start the real container, and we'll run the test on it. And a remote container, as I said before, is just on a container that is already running, and that it will work, and where you can deploy your archive. Another very important characteristic of Arquillian is that it's easy to extend. The architecture is done in a way that can integrate with already existing framework of testing. But you can actually add a new container if you need it, or new functionality. You can actually, these are just an example of the kind of container that, of the kind of text that are available right now to download. There is an integration with Spring. Arquillian will come, the core Arquillian will come with the integration with some notation like AGB or persistence. This Spring extension will allow the deployment and the execution of tests for application that use Spring. There is Arquillian Drone. Arquillian Drone is actually an extension that allows the execution of functional testing. It integrates with Selenium. And what happens is that Arquillian will work as a client. It won't run the test in the container, but it will just create a deploy it, and then you will use Selenium to run an instance of a browser. And check the result of the pages loaded or whatever. The Arquillian persistence is used to test the persistence. What happened with in this case is that normally the test will run inside a transaction, but it can be useful in certain situation to test the persistence layer. And with this instruction, you can actually say that your test needs to be inside a transaction, and you can give some functionality now to use JBUG to load the data in your DB when you need them. Important is a quite new extension. It's very useful to test portlets. In the end, what we have is something that that we wanted since the beginning. We want using Arquillian, we are able to write integration tests as they were unit tests, and so we can run that in the id and we can run them in the build. We can focus only on the part that we want to test without deploying necessarily all our application. And this means quicker feedback about what we are doing. You can actually inject your EGB or your resources there in the JDI. You can access the persistence identity. You can access the identity manager if you need it. And of course, we can run the same test in the build. This is a Maven project, but it doesn't have to be. You can actually put your the dependencies that Arquillian needs on the class path, and it will work just fine. We can actually even change the container where we want to test this. It can be helpful to, for example, we can use an embedded version of Glassfish. What's happening now is that Arquillian is running the same test. The logic isn't changed, but instead it's using the embedded Glassfish. You can see that if you have a very quick container, you can actually have an immediate feedback of what's going on in your application. And you can see another example. Before I showed this, you can actually test using Selenium. And I have a demo for that. That's fine. What will happen is that this project has a login page, and Arquillian is going to deploy the login on the server, and then we will start Selenium and Firefox to check is it possible to login on this page.
Which version of JBoss is Arquillian working with at the moment? Obviously,
Sorry?
you're using 7. Which version is JBoss
Yeah,
working
we're
with?
using the latest version of JBoss 7. And
We're stuck on 5.12 for a while. Does it work with that?
yeah, you will work with the, not only you can change the different container, but even the different version. It's just that JBoss 7 is a lot faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not GAs.
But you see, if you have this kind of testing, you can actually do a quick check if your application will work on JBoss 7. This is something that is done in some JBoss project.
So for that test, what did the ShrinkWrap application look like? Were you just deploying just a few classes, or
In this case, I
for
will
the,
just
for the UI test?
the UI test. Yeah, I'm deploying the web application. This part create the develop part of my web archive, and I just including every single file in it. This is not necessary. ShrinkWrap is very powerful, and if you prefer, you can actually package your application using a build, and then import the package in directly. You can actually import the package and then change something in ShrinkWrap, replacing some files.
Right, okay, right.
Usually it depends a lot on the application. In particular, if you deal with some legacy code, a legacy application, it's very hard to isolate the different components. There's always some strange dependency. But yeah, you have the most benefit if your application is very well developed, like in any kind of test. And this is not very good. You can actually use Maven repository if you need some dependencies. Quite often, if you are building an enterprise archive, you need to add some jar or some other library from external resources. You can actually import them as you're building the application with Maven. It will connect to the same repository or offline. I can show you the part where we're using when we actually executing the test. You can see it here. As you can see, we're using the extension I was talking about before is Drone. Drone is actually like a layer of abstraction amongst any other tool that you want to use to do this kind of testing. It can be Selenium or WebDrive. And what happens is that by using this extension, you can actually obtain the manager of this test. And it will let you do several different kind of operation on the browser. So you can actually connect to the real page and then do any kind of assertion. In this case, we are checking you can see the right messages like the welcome and the goodbye when we turn on the server.
Does it integrate at all with things like Google Web Toolkits?
Sorry?
Does it integrate at all with Google Web Toolkits? Or we are our own application?
I think there is an extension. I don't think at the moment there is an extension for that. But I see on the repository that someone is thinking about doing it. So maybe there is not right now, but it will come soon. Yeah, in the end, Arquillian it's quite a new project. So, and the thing is that in the beginning there was only the core that it will manage most of the things. But right now on the repository there are a lot of extensions that are popping out every day. So it's very useful to have feedback for this kind of things. Everything is open source, so you can actually suggest it or contribute to it.
So when it starts the JBoss S7 instance, in order to start that, you have to have a configuration, server config XML. Where does that come from, that situation?
Well, it's in the sources.
Okay.
It's this one. Let's see it. Yeah, depending on the container that you want to use, there are different kind of properties you can set. There are different kind of properties even for the extension.
So say you have an application that uses a JCA repository. Inside, if you're going to use that JBoss, what you need to do is write a resource adapter section in the config file for that.
No.
And your code can then talk to it.
The only thing that you need to set up is the, well, you need to say where the container that you want to use is.
Okay, right, so you should refer to the container that's already set up.
And that's all the stuff. In the end, you can inject all the stuff that is loaded by the container, and you have access to it. It's really like you would have it's exactly as what you have in production. Well, for example, this button they just show you the deployed archive, so you can check that everything is correct in it. I can show you another example that I have here. Another use case is actually a real use case scenario. Advert search I integrate the scene with Hibernate, and what it does is slide. What it does is allow you to index the entity that you are inserting the DB to an index in a way that you can do full text search on it, like similar like Google-like search, you can say. And one of the configurations that you can use with iris search is JMS configuration. What happens is that you have a master that will receive the request from different slaves, and it will be the real one to update the main index, the index, and every once in a while it will copy the index from the slave to the different slave. They can be machine or just different application inside the same container. And one of the problems that we had with Hibernate search was to test the JMS configuration, because there is some XML, and maybe when you upgrade your JBoss, something is changed, or in some cases was following the right standard. And so this is one of the examples where Arquillian is used. There are two tests that are created for in this case. One is just this is a bin that just it's on a GB that just receive the request and create new members, and the new member and then index it on the search. In this case, what we wanted to do was to check that it was possible to deploy Hibernate search on the server. And yeah, this is a real case, a bit more complex than the one that we've seen before. Because this is a Maven project, we are actually building the resources. The latest resource of Hibernate search, they are the ones we want to test. And then we are adding our bins to the archive. This is where we are removing some resources using the Maven dependency resolver. Because these kind of resources are already on the server. You don't need to redeploy the entity manager or any other thing. It's already there. and this will check that you can actually do use an assertion server. Yes. It's like running a normal unit test. And here you can see you can actually deploy more than one archive. It doesn't have to be one. For example, in this case, I'm saying to deploy. It's the same archive. What changes just some kind of configuration inside the archive to say that one must be the master and the other needs to be the slave. And defining in which order they need to be tested. And when this is done, I can inject my B and do a real registration of some members. In this case, the test needs to be executed in the right order, and I want to run some tests only on some deployment, not on the performance. And you can see here. This was a bit more complicated because we needed to enable. With this test, we wanted to test the JMS configuration, but even the connection between the authentication on the queue and the JMS system. And by the way, I didn't have to stop anything again, just to make it work. So it's a pro integration. If you can run a JUnit test, you will run this as well.
So how does it know where to find the JBoss?
It's in the configuration. Which show you as soon as I find. Yeah, these are some configuration. He noticed he has to use a JBoss because I find the adapter on the class path. But because this is a lineage JBoss, he needs to find the location of the cell. I think you can actually set on a JBoss home variable and you will find it as well. So it's very you can there are many ways to set up a container, and because it's using Maven, the container is downloaded by Maven, so you don't even have to take the time to download it. What happens is that to run the test on the container, you will enrich your CAD with some additional resources, like in particular, well, depends on the protocol. You can be set up, and generally it's like a server that will receive the code from the client, and it will run the test, and it will return them. So it is saying to use different XML, different configuration from the default one, because we need to enable JMS. And this line, if I'm comment, will enable the debug. Of course, you can debug everything as long as the resources and it's, if you can connect on the containers in debug mode, you can just run the breadcrumbs whenever you need. You can see there are a lot of demo actually that can be executed on the where you can find on the GitHub repository. These are just free, but you can, for example, run a lot of instances in cluster mode and test concurrency. Thank you.